is that the piece of the cocktail glass that you observed on the front yard area of 34 Fairview Road on January 29th, 2022?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would ask that the witness be allowed to take it out of the bag and display it to the jury.
Okay. Go ahead.
Well, hi everybody. Welcome back to Fair and Square Files. For those of you who are viewing for the very first time, thank you so much for taking the time. We really appreciate it. We know how valuable time is these days. We are covering the Karen Reid trial, which is proving to be extremely intriguing. Today, we are kicking straight into the testimony of one Detective Sergeant Michael Lank. We've already done a video earlier on, which was the cross-examination of Sergeant Sean Good. As always, let's keep the comments as respectful and empathetic as possible. And thank you once again for the support of the channel. It's really amazing. It means a lot to us. Without further ado, let's kick off today's proceedings.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name?
Michael Lank, L-A-N-K.
And how are you employed, sir?
I'm a lieutenant with the Canton Police.
And how long in total have you been a member of the Canton Police?
Over 24 years.
And how long have you held the rank of lieutenant with Canton Police?
It'll be 2 years in August.
Now, prior to, well, let me ask you first, with reference to your responsibilities as a lieutenant, if you could explain to the jury just in general terms, what are your duties and responsibilities as a lieutenant?
I oversee the gun licensing and patrol.
And prior to working as a lieutenant, what was your role with the Canton Police before that?
I was a detective sergeant.
And how long were you a detective sergeant?
From September of 21 until August of 22.
And during that time frame as a detective sergeant, what were your duties and responsibilities with regard to the Canton Police at that point?
To oversee the Detective Bureau, ensure that all reports were issued to respective detectives and completed.
Now, you're also familiar with the role within the Canton Police of a sort of shift sergeant, is that correct?
Yes.
And if you could explain to the jury sort of what are the differences between what a shift sergeant does and what a detective sergeant does?
Shift sergeant's primary responsibility is to run the daily shift, give out sectors to each of the cars, and dispatch cruisers to appropriate areas, so forth.
And if I could turn your attention to the morning of January 29th, 2022. At some point after 6 a.m., did you receive a call in regard to a dispatch that your department had received?
Yes.
And who, if anyone, called you around that time?
Sergeant Sean Good.
Do you know approximately what time Sergeant Good called you?
I believe it was 6:08.
And with reference to that call, the initial call from Sergeant Good, what, if any, information did he relay to you at that time?
Sergeant Good stated that there was a gentleman found in the snow at 34 Fairview Road, and he was in very grave condition, and he brought it to my attention that he was also a Boston police officer.
And subsequent to that, through the course of your investigative work on this case, did you learn who that unresponsive male was?
Yes.
And who did you learn?
John O'Keefe.
And upon receiving that call, where did you go?
I went to 34 Fairview Road.
And if you know, about what time would you estimate that you arrived in the area of 34 Fairview Road?
I live fairly close, so I was on scene by, I believe it was 6:24, 6:25.
And upon your arrival, who, if anyone else, from your department was there prior to you?
Officer Sarif, Officer Mullaney, and Sergeant Good.
And when you arrived, beyond sort of the other officers from your department, what, if any, other activity or what, if any, other persons did you observe on scene?
When I arrived, I observed that the ambulance was still there. There was multiple EMTs, and I observed some witnesses also.
And with respect to the ambulance, it's your understanding Mr. O'Keefe was in that ambulance?
Yes,
And did you ever see Mr. O'Keefe on that one?
I did not.
And at some point, the other officers who preceded your arrival, did they direct you their attention to where Mr. O'Keefe was found when they first arrived?
They did.
And where was that sort of in relation to the property, as you recall?
If you're looking at 34 Fairview Road, it was on the left side of the property, about 8 feet from the road.
And in that sort of general area, what, if any, sort of landmarks or other sort of items in that area of the front yard did you observe?
I observed a flagpole. There was a fire hydrant and some brush area over there.
And upon your arrival on scene, who was the first person that you spoke to?
Sergeant Sean Good.
And you had some conversation with him, is that correct?
That's correct.
And then following talking to Sergeant Good, who, if anyone else, did speak to on scene?
I spoke to Jennifer McCabe.
And where was it in relation to the scene that you first spoke to Jennifer McCabe?
I believe I spoke to Jennifer McCabe right in front of Mark Cruiser 683, which was assigned to Officer Sarif.
And then about how long a conversation was that initially with Ms. McCabe?
I would say probably 8 or 9 minutes.
And in addition to Ms. McCabe, what, if any, other sort of civilians did you observe in that area around that time?
I observed Kerry Roberts, and I don't recall seeing anybody else at the scene while I was focused on Ms. McCabe.
Now, with respect to Jennifer McCabe, I'll strike that. So after you spoke with Ms. McCabe for 8 or 9 minutes, then who, if anyone else, did you speak to at that time?
So after I spoke with Ms. McCabe, I believe I was able to then contact the CPAC unit.
And what is the CPAC unit?
CPAC unit is the investigative division for the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office.
Why did you contact them?
Because I was made aware at some point that it did not appear that Mr. O'Keefe was going to survive, and I wanted them to be aware of the situation.
And did they respond at that time?
No.
Now, with reference to, is that sort of a typical protocol, or what, if any, sort of typical protocol would you have responding to a scene of this nature?
Yes, any sort of scene where it appears that the person is not going to survive, we would contact State Police CPAC unit.
And why is that?
Because they investigate all deaths.
So they have jurisdiction over all unattended deaths, is that correct?
That's correct.
As well as homicides, things of that nature.
Correct.
Now, once you, do you recall who, if anyone, you spoke to on that first call or notification to CPAC?
It would have been just the dispatch center on the first call.
And what, if any, subsequent calls did you have with regard to CPAC while you were on scene that morning?
I got a return call from Trooper Michael Proctor.
And from your conversation with Trooper Proctor, what was your understanding as far as their response to the scene at that time?
So at that point in time, Trooper Proctor informed me that they would not be responding.
I don't know what that noise is, but if I could just ask you to repeat your last response, because frankly, I didn't hear it.
Yes. In speaking to Trooper Proctor, he advised me at that point that they would not be responding.
And did he inform you as to why not at that time?
Objection.
Sustained.
Now, when you arrived on scene, what, if anything, did you note as far as the weather conditions?
The weather conditions were extremely poor. There were high winds, heavy snow, and freezing temperatures.
Now, You mentioned when you first arrived on scene, Mr. O'Keefe was in the back of that ambulance, is that correct?
That's correct.
And when was it that the ambulance left in relation to when you arrived?
Very, very shortly after I arrived, I would say within 5 minutes.
Now, as far as injuries to Mr. O'Keefe, who, if anyone, relayed any information in regard to that?
Sergeant Good advised me that
Objection.
Sustained.
Now, as far as following your conversation with Ms. McCabe, what was sort of the next steps that you took on scene?
after I spoke to Ms. McCabe, I advised her that we were going to need to speak with the homeowners. She said that they were probably sleeping. I advised her that we were going to need to speak with them, and that's when I placed the call to the CPAC unit.
And prior to that, when you were on scene, had you seen anyone come in or go out of the residence at 34 Fairview Road?
No.
And as far as sort of the other houses on the street, what, if any, activity did you observe with reference to any residents of those homes coming in or going out of their homes?
I did not observe anybody come in or out of their home.
Following your initial call to CPAC and conversation with Trooper Proctor, what is it that you did next?
Once that call was complete, Sergeant Good and I observed that there was now a light on in the house of 34 Fairview, and we made the decision to then go in and speak with the homeowners.
And how was it that you sort of proceeded up to the home?
I believe, I don't recall if we used I believe we used the driveway, but I'm not 100% sure.
And you came into the home, recall which door that you used to enter the home?
The main door, the front door.
When you entered in through the main door, what, if you could describe to the jury sort of what you observed as far as what was before you from a layout perspective?
There was a staircase right in front of us, and to the right, it entered into like what appeared to be like a dining area.
And who, if anyone, did you speak with inside the home that morning?
Brian Albert and Nicole Albert.
And what, if any, relationship to the home did you determine based on your conversation with them?
They were the homeowners.
Now, Brian Albert, is that someone that you knew prior to January 29th, 2022?
Yes.
And how did you know?
I knew him as the oldest of the Albert brothers.
And did you know some of the other Albert brothers?
Yes.
And let me ask you this, Sergeant. Where did you grow up?
Canton.
And how long have you lived in Canton?
We moved here, we moved to Canton when I was 5 years old.
So essentially, since you were 5 years old, you live in the town, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You work in the town, correct?
Yes.
Do you have children?
I do.
Any of them play sports?
They do.
Objection.
And sustained.
Move to strike.
Strike that.
What, if any, other sort of, other than living and working in the town, what, if anything else, is it that you do around the town?
I coach youth sports.
And how long have you done that for?
I would say at least 9 or 10 years.
And how would you describe your relationship with Brian Albert prior to that January 29th, 2022?
Civil?
The two of you friends? Do you socialize?
No.
Now, in addition to Brian Albert and Nicole Albert, who, if anyone else, where did you speak to them within the home?
Just inside the door by the staircase.
And how would you describe their demeanor when you were speaking to them?
They appeared, especially Mr. Albert, appeared disheveled, looked like he had just woken up.
And about how long a conversation was it between Brian Albert and Nicole Albert that initial time?
I'd say 15, 20 minutes.
And beyond that, who, if anyone else, did you see within the home besides yourself, Sergeant Goods, and Mr. and Mrs. Albert?
Jennifer McCabe?
No one else at that time?
No,
Are you familiar with a gentleman named Brian Higgins?
I am.
And how are you familiar with him?
I met Brian when he was stationed at our police station. I don't know how many years ago it was, but he was assigned to our building years ago. That's how I met him.
And assigned it in what capacity? And what I mean by that is, what did he do for work?
Brian is a ATF agent.
And did you see Mr. Higgins at any point in time during the time that you were at Fairview Road that morning?
Not on my initial response.
So sometime after, is that correct?
Yes.
And when about was that?
That would have been shortly after 9 a.m.
And we'll get to that in a moment, but after your conversation with Brian Albert and Nicole Albert inside the house, what is it that you did then?
Could you repeat that, please?
After talking to the homeowners, what was your next step on scene that day? What did you do next?
After speaking with the family, I came out. By that point, Lieutenant Gallagher was on scene and spoke with Lieutenant Gallagher as to what we were going to do next as far as the scene itself.
And to that end, what, if anything, did you or the other officers do with regard to sort of security of the scene at that time?
So we had put up some crime scene tape to try to protect the scene, but it was a futile effort because of the wind. But there were marked patrol cars in front of the yard at all times, so the scene was fairly secure at all times.
And then, with relation to the scene or the area that you were directed, or your attention was directed to as to where Mr. O'Keefe had been found, what, if anything, did you do with reference to that area?
I stood by and observed while Lieutenant Gallagher used a leaf blower to try to clear the top layers of snow off of the scene.
And at some point in time, that particular process, was that memorialized in any way?
Yes,
Okay, and how was it done so far?
in my report.
I'm sorry, beyond that, was there any sort of photos or video that were taken of that leaf blower process?
Yes, Sergeant Good was able to take video while Lieutenant Gallagher used the leaf blower.
You've seen that video, is that correct?
Yes,
And what's contained in that video, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of sort of what happened on scene that morning?
yes.
Now, in addition let me ask you this, as far as the leaf blower was concerned, what was sort of the purpose of that, or what was the thinking behind that?
The purpose behind the leaf blower was to just take the top layers of snow off to reveal what was underneath and try to preserve any potential evidence.
And upon employing that, what, if anything, did you then observe in that area of the front lawn?
Ultimately, we were able to see what appeared to be blood drops in the snow, as well as a drinking glass, cocktail glass.
Now, in addition to the video that was taken with regard to the leaf blowing process, or the use of the leaf blower, were the photos that were taken of the scene as well?
Yes.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have exhibit number 27. Sergeant Lank, what's up on the screen that's been previously marked as exhibit 27? Do you recognize that?
Yes.
And what do you recognize it to be, sir?
I recognize that to be the scene that we were working with the leaf blower.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
So I'm handing you a laser pointer, basically very simple. Just press on that button and I don't want to do
Okay, thank you.
Lieutenant Lank, with using that laser pointer, if you could draw the jury's attention to what, if anything, of significance you observe in this photograph in relation to what you saw on scene that day.
So it appeared to see blood drops here in the snow, that had been revealed by wiping away the top layer, as well as the glass protruding from the snow.
Thanks. Ms. Gilman, you can take that down. Now, at any point in time when you were on scene, did you have any contact or interaction with a person named Karen?
I did not.
Did you see her on scene at all that day?
I don't recall seeing her. I believe she was there while I was there, but I never spoke to her.
Now, following your initial conversation inside the home of 34 Fairview with Ryan Albert, Nicole Albert, and speaking to Jennifer McCabe outside, who, if anyone else, did you speak with that arrived on scene that morning?
Matthew McCabe.
And when was it that Matthew McCabe arrived in relation to your arrival and when you spoke to the other people?
Matthew McCabe arrived just a couple of minutes after I had walked out of the house the first time.
And so when he arrived, where did you go?
Moments after he arrived, I went back into the house to speak with Mr. McCabe.
And about how long a conversation was it that you were in the house when you were speaking to Mr. McCabe?
I'm not sure. I'd say maybe 5 minutes.
And over the course of that morning, about how many times did you go into the residence at 34 Fairview Road?
3.
Anyone ever tell you that you couldn't go into the home or that stopped you at the doorway or anything like that?
No.
And with reference to inside of the home, what, if any, observations did you make of sort of how the home was situated, anything disheveled or anything like that?
Everything appeared in order.
And just if you know, what, if any, relationship does Matthew McCabe have to Jennifer?
Matthew McCabe is Jennifer McCabe's husband.
Now, turning back to what was just up on the screen in Exhibit 27, with regard to those items that you observed in the yards in the front lawn that day, what, if anything, did you or the other officers do with respect to those items?
The drinking glass was secured into an evidence bag, and the blood drops were secured into 6 solo cups.
And why were they secured into 6 solo cups?
We did the best that we could with the situation, with the weather and deteriorating situation. Lieutenant Gallagher was able to attain the solo cups from Lieutenant Kelleher's house, which was diagonally across the street.
Now, with respect to the CPAC unit or the phone call that you made to the state police, beyond sort of the jurisdiction of them having over unattended deaths and things of that nature, what, if any, other assets that the state police have at their disposal with regard to crime scene that your department has found?
They have crime scene units that process crime scenes.
Now, with respect to those items, once they were secured, just in reference to the solo cups, beyond sort of just putting them into solo cups, what, if anything else, did you or the other officers do to secure those items specifically?
They were secured into a brown evidence bag.
And following them being secured, where did they go from there?
They were then, they were then placed into my truck at that point, my police truck that I was using that day, and ultimately transported back to the police station.
And transported back to the police station
by me.
And once you were back at the police station with those items, what, if anything, did you do with them at that time?
They were secured into temporary evidence in the refrigerated unit for the solo cups, and the glass was secured into temporary evidence.
And so when you say temporary evidence, why were they secured into temporary evidence?
They were secured into temporary evidence so that they could ultimately be turned over to the state police.
And as far as when you secure something into temporary evidence, just in general terms first, What is it that you do with that item to secure it or label it or anything else?
So it's assigned a property number, and we would print out a property label, and then that's assigned. It's assigned to the OF number, which is the report.
The OF stands for a report offense, is that correct?
Offense, yes.
So each report that you generate has a specific number with an OF following it,
That's correct.
and then that number is associated with the evidence that you secure, correct?
Yes.
Now, with reference to that evidence, whether it's temporary evidence or otherwise, what, if any, restrictions are there with regard to access to those items within your department?
So temporary evidence is accessible to all officers.
And to officers from your department, correct?
From our department, yes.
And following that, are you aware, or what, if anything, are you aware of what happened with those items after you secured them into temporary evidence?
I believe they were ultimately turned over to the state police.
May I approach the witness?
Yes.
So I'm handing you up a box. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
And what do you recognize that to be?
Appears to be a box to secure evidence with a call number on it.
And is that a box that you've seen earlier today?
Yes.
And with reference to what's contained within the box, have you seen that this morning as well?
Yes.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would ask that the witness be allowed to take what's in the box out of the box.
Okay.
Sir, just for the record, you have some evidence gloves with you in court today, is that correct?
That's correct.
Sorry, sir, before you just go into that, just with reference to the bag that you have before you, what, if any, markings are on that that relate to sort of your case, your case number with Kansas Police?
So it is there's a case number assigned to us, 22-87OF, and there is a property number, 22-18PR, and it's listed as broken drinking glass.
Have
And
you seen the item contained within that bag earlier this morning as well?
yes,
And what you observed within that bag, is that the piece of the cocktail glass that you observed on the front yard area of 34 Fairview Road on January 29th, 2022?
yes, it is.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would ask that the witness be allowed to take it out of the bag and display it to the jury.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. You can place it back in the bag. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, Commonwealth to seek to introduce and admit as the next exhibit.
Yes. The 45. Mhm.
Now, Lieutenant Lank, once you were back at the police station, what, if any, call did you receive from anyone in regard to who, if anyone, called you once you were back at the station?
Jennifer McCabe called at 9 a.m.
And where did you go following that phone call with Jennifer McCabe?
Lieutenant Gallagher and I went back to 34 Fairview Road.
So this is now the third time that you've gone back and gone inside the residence at 34 Fairview Road, is that correct?
That's correct.
And who, if anyone, did you speak with, along with yourself and Lieutenant Gallagher, once you returned there that morning?
Jennifer McCabe.
And about how long a period of conversation was that second conversation that you had with Mr. McCabe?
Between 5 and 10 minutes.
And then following that, where did you go from there?
Returned to the police station.
Now, if I could turn your attention to February 4th of 2022. You working on that day?
I was.
And in the same capacity that you had described earlier?
Yes.
And at some point, approximately 8:50 a.m. or so, who, if anyone, called you on that day?
Lieutenant Gallagher.
And what, if anything, or where did he direct you to go during the course of that conversation?
Lieutenant Gallagher directed me to go back to 34 Fairview Road and meet with Chief Berkowitz as he had possibly discovered more evidence.
And in the time between January 29th and February 4th, had you gone back to 34 Fairview Road at any point?
No.
Now, between that time of January 29th, 2022 and February 4th of 2022, what, if anything, occurred in regards to the weather in between those days?
So the weather had, the temperatures had increased and there was some rain.
And increased, if you know, approximately how much?
I believe it made it up to the mid 40s.
So well above freezing, is that correct?
Correct.
And with regard to the snowfall that had come from the 28th and the 29th, what, if anything, just in general, had you, not in general, specifically to 34 Fairview Road, what, if anything, did you observe between the snow that you observed there on the 29th and the snow that you observed there on February 4th?
A lot of the snow had melted and a lot of the ground had been revealed. And
when you arrived at 34 Fairview Road on February 4th, what, if anything, did you observe and where did you observe?
Chief Berkowitz brought my attention to a piece of red glass that was about 6 to 8 feet off the into the yard.
Now, before we get to that, as far as when you responded, who, if anyone else from your department, responded along with you?
Detective Tim Taylor.
And the pieces of plastic that you observed, where were they in relation to where you had observed or where you had been directed to that Mr. O'Keefe had been found on January 29th?
The glass was in the vicinity of where Mr. O'Keefe had been discovered.
Now, with respect to that pieces of plastic that you observed, what, if anything, did you do to memorialize where they were?
I photographed the piece of plastic as it sat.
And did you or anyone in your presence touch, manipulate, or move those pieces of plastic in any way?
No.
And at some point after you arrived on scene, who, if anyone, did you contact in regard to securing those items?
I contacted the CPAC unit, and ultimately Trooper Buchanan arrived back at the scene.
And if you know about how much time elapsed between the time that you contacted CPAC and the time that Buchanan arrived?
I honestly don't recall.
And when Trooper Buchanan arrived on scene, what, if anything, did you observe him to do with those pieces of plastic that you directed his attention to?
Trooper Buchanan secured the item into a evidence bag.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
showing you two photographs. Just ask you just briefly to look them over and look up when you're finished. Do you recognize those, sir?
I do.
What do you recognize in those photographs?
I recognize this to be the piece of plastic that Chief Berkowitz had observed on that morning.
Those are the photographs that you took that morning as well, is that correct?
That's correct.
What's contained in those photographs, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of what you observed on February 4th, 2022?
Yes, it is.
Now, the Commonwealth seek to introduce and admit as the next to exhibit.
Okay. This is 46 and 47.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have first of those photographs up on the screen. And Lieutenant Lank, do you recognize what's depicted up on the screen currently?
Yes.
And this is sort of a further out image of that piece of plastic you were talking about, is that correct?
Yes.
Using the laser pointer before you, if you could just draw the jury's attention to where in the photograph you observe that piece. Thank you. Ms. Gilman, the next photograph. And sir, do you again recognize what's up on the screen?
Yes, it's a close-up picture of the piece of plastic.
Thank you. Ms. Gilman, you can. If I may ask.
Yes.